This morning's scripture reading can be found in John chapter 20, verses 29 through 31. Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name.
I do believe that Jesus is the Son of God. I do believe that. Okay. We are starting something new this week. We're going to be talking about the last days of Jesus' life on earth. And I've been entrusted with teaching about Jesus and Lazarus. So we are going to see some artistic depictions. Can you see this? This was a big story, of course, in the New Testament. And a lot of the famous artists have come up with depictions. This is an engraving, Johann Wierix from the 1500s. I'm not sure which one Lazarus is. I guess he's the one down there. Here's another one by Giuseppe Salviati from 1545. We've got Jesus, we've got Lazarus. I guess that's Martha next to Jesus. And throughout the talk today, there's going to be different paintings that maybe you'll recognize. Okay, last week of Jesus' life. Whenever I study the Bible, I want to remember that these were real people. These weren't two-dimensional people, but these were real people with emotions and feelings, and they may be different from us in that they don't have cars, and they didn't have iPhones, and they didn't have ice cream, but how they reacted to things and how they when stuff would happen, well, they'd react kind of the same way we would, right? Humanity hasn't changed. Everything around us has, but humanity hasn't. So when you first learned this, it might have been on a flannel graph like this. Very two-dimensional. And you can tell the story. You can get the facts. Jesus went to Bethany and raised Lazarus. Okay, those are the facts. That's what we teach our kids. We go into a little more depth in our Bible Bowl class that I teach or whatever, but the little kids, they're learning something like this. But you can't forget that these were real people with real emotions. Okay, so let's review some things that we already know. Jesus can heal people. The paralytic through the roof, Matthew 9, Mark 2, Luke 5. Remember what happened? They lowered the guy. Jesus forgave him first, but then he healed him. He was in the same room with him, and he did that so you will know. The miracle was clearly a sign. Peter's mother-in-law, Matthew 8, Mark 5, Luke 4. Jesus can heal people when he's close to them, like Peter's mother-in-law. But then you got the story of the centurion's servant, Matthew 8 and Luke 7. Jesus wasn't even in the same town. He says, "Oh, your faith healed him. He's going to be fine." He wasn't even in the same town. Jesus healed him. Jesus clearly has that power. And what about Jairus' daughter, Matthew 9, Mark 5, and the widow of Nain's son in Luke 7? Jesus has the power over death. So you know these stories. And the story we'll talk about today, Lazarus, is really only mentioned in the book of John. We don't see it anywhere else. And but it's in John chapter 11. Now, incidentally, when I first learned this story, I remember my mother telling me how to remember where it is in the book. And she says, John 11, you can imagine those two ones laying down like they're dead, and then they stand up. And I thought, that's silly. But I never forgot that John 11 is where you find the story of Lazarus. So whatever helps you remember things. Okay, I want to say a political word here. Here's a couple of icons, Byzantine and Russian, 1300s and 1400s. Kind of the same picture, really. I want to say a political word, and that's patronage. What is patronage? Well, our system of government allows for a certain degree of patronage, meaning if you are the president or whoever is elected, you get to pick who works for you. So you get to pick who's in the cabinet, you get to pick judges, you get to pick ambassadors, and that's nothing wrong with that. That's kind of how it works. So, and you always pick somebody who's got the same leanings, right? We see that, whoever's in office. Well, you can expect then, if you were a big supporter of the president, you might expect some patronage. You might expect maybe they'll name me ambassador to somewhere, or I'll have some kind of important position. Well, that's patronage. So, we're going to talk about this some more. So, we are about to talk about the story of Lazarus. How would you characterize Lazarus' family relationship to Jesus? Well, we will see in John 11:3 that Lazarus was loved by Jesus. That Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, John 11:5. We will see that Martha believed that Jesus was the Messiah. Mary and Lazarus surely believed that too. So this is a family that was close to Jesus and may have had some wealth. You know, they had a family tomb. Most people didn't have that. And you'll see later that Mary has a pint of real expensive perfume. Not everybody had that. So this is kind of an important family, and you wonder, maybe these were supporters. A lot of you guys get support, you know. You don't think of Jesus needing support. There's a verse, Luke chapter 8, verse 3, the women were helping to support them out of their own means. So you don't think they had a big travel budget. They walked everywhere. But then again, Jesus didn't just create food every time they were hungry. They were supported. So maybe these were some supporters of Jesus. So, what's in it for me is the question mark there. Now, I don't know how Mary and Martha felt, but again, they were human like us. Wouldn't it be kind of natural for them to think, man, my brother is really sick, and I watched Jesus heal this guy and this one and this one, and now this one is sick, and he loves Lazarus, and he's not there. Now, I don't know how they felt, but I think it would be natural to feel this way. So we're going to read here in a little bit and get some more. So, where is Jesus? Not Bethany. Got Rembrandt with his depiction of Jesus and Lazarus. Where was Jesus? Well, in John chapter 10, you see that he was in Jerusalem. He was going at it with the Pharisees. He was telling them some things like, I am the gate. He was telling them, I am the good shepherd. And then he says that you're not my sheep. And this was around the time of the Feast of Dedication. We call that Hanukkah. And so that's wintertime. But they were ready to throw rocks at him, right? So Jesus and his disciples escaped. They went across the River Jordan, and that's where they are. So when do the events of John 11 occur? Well, between that and Passover, because the end of chapter 11, verse 55, says that the Passover would soon occur. Now, I'm thinking the reason why this is the first sermon in our Holy Week series, whatever, that we're thinking this is right before. And I've seen that theory. I don't know that we can know that for sure, but it's a pretty good theory because what I think we talk about tomorrow is the triumphal entry. Well, some say that the reason why it was a triumphal entry is because they were celebrating the raising of Lazarus. Don't know for sure. And we also know that this might have been, man, this was the last straw for the Pharisees. They've been putting up with Jesus. Man, he's speaking against us. We're worried about Rome. We're going to have to do something about Jesus. The raising Lazarus was maybe the last resort. So we know that it was sometime after or right before Passover. All right, so let's examine this story. And again, emotions, feelings. What are we going to see in this section? And the answer is a lot. I've got a 14-point sermon here. We're going to go 100 miles an hour, I promise. Okay. First one is love. So now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So that Jesus sent word to Jesus, Lord, The one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory that the God's Son may be glorified through it." Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Okay, so love is the first emotion. And I've got the second one. Remember Mary pouring the perfume on Jesus' feet? I'd call that generosity. Generosity. Okay, I'm going to, in the entrance of time, we're going to skip a little bit here. Jesus stayed where he was, but he says, "Hey, let's go back to Judea." What did the apostles say? Verse 8, "But Rabbi, a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back?" What does that sound like? It sounds like fear to me. They don't want to get rocks thrown at him, and I don't think I would either. So Jesus explains about Lazarus. Hey, he's sick, but it's not going to lead to death. And they say, "Oh, well, he sleeps, he's going to get better." No, he's really dead. He's not just sick, he's dead. And man, that must have bewildered the apostles. But he says, "No, I'm doing this so that you may believe, but let us go to him." Verse 16, "Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, 'Let us also go, that we may die with him.'" That's pretty brave, isn't it? So I see some courage there. Okay, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Don't tell me he was just sick. Don't tell me he swooned. Don't tell me he passed out. If you've been buried for 4 days, brothers and sisters, you're dead. So Lazarus has been buried for 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. Oh, wait a minute. 2 miles? He was only 2 miles away? I walked 2 miles on the elliptical machine this morning, and it took less than 30 minutes. Jesus was close enough to come sooner, but he didn't. He had a reason for not doing that, and that reason is so that people would believe. Okay, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the time of the loss of their brother. Many Jews had made that trip. Sadness and sympathy. Don't you huddle around people who have lost loved ones? Yes, you do. We all do. So I see some sadness and sympathy back then. Verse 20, "When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home." So Martha's out first. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you'd have been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Isn't that kind of disappointing? Oh, if you'd only been here. But Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Confidently she said that. And Jesus said a very famous verse, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die." Do you believe this? You probably memorized that verse, didn't you? This is one of the 7 I ams in the book of John. We've got, "I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I'm the gate. I'm the good shepherd. I'm the resurrection and the life. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. I'm the true vine." And we've got, "I am the resurrection and the life." We also have, "I am thirsty," but I don't think that one counts. He said that on the cross. Okay, so your brother will rise again. Do you believe this? "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." Let me read that again. What did she just say? "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come in to this world." Well, that is a big confession, isn't it? Belief and confession. And that is no small thing. She is saying a revolutionary thing here, that she believes that he is the Messiah. We all made that confession too. I think we all did. And we want the whole world to make that confession because Jesus is the Messiah and the world needs to know that. Okay, after she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her. Why? Because they were supposing that she was going to the tomb to mourn there. So, grief. They're all still in grief. And that's how we would feel when we'd lost a loved one too, right? I remember funerals that I've seen where family would welcome people, and almost every time a new person would walk up, the tears would start again. The grief is shared. But it helps. It helps. So, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Where have we heard that before? Martha said the same thing. They both believed that. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Jesus was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Okay, I learned something in tomorrow's Timothy's class. Jesus wept is the shortest verse in the Bible, but it's not the shortest verse in the NIV. I didn't know that. Job 3:2, the verse says, "He said," which is shorter than Jesus wept. Now in the King James, it's, "And Job spake," which is longer than Jesus wept. But there you go. You never know when you're going to learn something. So Jesus weeps here. And is that surprising? I mean, one of the nicknames for Jesus is that he was the man of sorrows. So maybe that shouldn't be too surprising that we see tears. But think of the audience that may have originally heard this. You know, a Gentile audience that comes out of Zeus and Apollo and all those gods. This might be the most surprising thing about the story. They have no problem with a god raising a human to life. You know, Zeus could maybe do that. But for a god to actually care about a human and cry over a human, that's got to be surprising to some of the Gentiles there. I'm certain that Jesus could feel grief of the people around him, and even though he would soon perform a miracle, he had to be sympathetic to the tears of others. Now, I don't know, do real men cry? I know I do sometimes. Say what you will about that. But when you think about it, when I cry tears, it's usually something that I'm powerless to do anything about. Somebody had died, or something's really sad, or maybe even really sweet. But I'm powerless. Well, Jesus isn't powerless in anything. So what we see from him is the emotions of others. Don't think for a minute that Jesus can't feel your pain and know what you're going through, because we know that he can. Okay, so Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." Verse 37, "But some of them said, 'Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?'" A little bit of confusion, a little bit of doubt. Why didn't he heal him? There was some confusion there. So Jesus, once more, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. I'm going to call that an imperative. Take away the stone. Well, obviously you don't command such a thing unless you're pretty confident that you can do something about that. And he knew what he was about to do. Well, Martha's going to protest. Martha's going to say, "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been in there how long? 4 days." Bad odor. I like to read the King James sometimes. I guess I grew up reading that. Do you know what it says in the King James? It says, "He stinketh." He stinketh because he's been in the grave 4 days. So I'm going to start using "he stinketh" in my everyday words here. But I think that's an interesting thing. I mean, this is her loved one in there. Now, if you're digging up King Tut and he's been buried 3,000 years, people don't maybe have so much of a problem with that. Or Billy the Kid, a long time ago. But this is their loved one in there. Nobody wants to remember Lazarus smelling like that, looking like that. They loved Lazarus. But she does it. They open up the tomb. Verse 40, then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. Prayerfulness, thankfulness. Jesus is praying. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that what? They may believe that you sent me. Okay, we're getting to the reason why Jesus waited. It's to believe, to help people believe. Then he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped in the strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Again, the emotion. How are people feeling? Now, I'm not going to speculate what Lazarus would have felt. What has he been through? Not going to speculate. Don't know. There is a legend. I don't know legends, but that he lived 30 more years and he never smiled again. Y'all heard that? I don't know. But everybody kept trying to kill him because he was kind of a proof that Jesus can do miracles. So everybody kept trying to kill him. So he went to Cyprus and kept up with Mary and John and whatever. Don't know. It's not in the Bible. But it is kind of an interesting legend that he was so disturbed by what he saw in the grave that he never smiled again. Don't know. Well, how does everybody else feel? Surprise, shock. He was dead. We know he was dead. He was buried. He's wearing those grave clothes. And here he comes out. We can be pretty sure how we would feel. And I think that if any of them were on the fence whether Jesus was the Messiah or not, this might be just the proof that they needed. I mean, that was the goal, right? So that they believe. So, what can we learn from this story? We got Vincent van Gogh drawing a picture there. What can we learn from this story? Well, I'll tell you this. Christ coming to earth cost him something. We're going to study this week about the crucifixion, and we know that. It cost him a lot of pain and suffering in his life. But his life was pain and suffering too. It came from heaven. So think of how much he was invested emotionally. That's hard. It cost something for Jesus to come here. Jesus loved Lazarus and grieved and wept with his family. Do you think Jesus loves you? Yes, he does. We know he does. Death and suffering are very scary things, and avoiding them is very important to us. Right? Right. But how does God look at it? Not the same way as we do, I bet. Isaiah 55:8, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. God looks at death differently than we do. The family of Lazarus, oh man, they desperately wanted him to not die. How did Jesus and God look at that? A little differently. There was a bigger purpose. 2 Corinthians 4:17, for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. These days that we are in are our light and momentary troubles. Don't forget there's a goal out there that's going to far outweigh anything we're going through in this life. Philippians 1:21, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. Do you agree with Paul here? Yes, I bet you do. And then John 12:24, very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Death is just the beginning for us. So, some of you have kids, have you ever done something for your kids that they just didn't understand at the moment? Eat your vegetables, go to bed early, don't play with matches, whatever it is. Maybe they didn't understand it at the time, but you have a longer view than they do. Well, maybe that's the way it is with God. He surely has a longer view than we do about death and suffering, and it's just different than ours. So, do you feel God owes you some kind of patronage? There's that word again, because of your Christianity. Tell the truth here. I mean, maybe you think, Man, I wish Osama bin Laden had gotten the cancer instead of my friend. And maybe Hitler should have gotten the tumor instead of my loved one. But we have to know that God's got a purpose, God's got a plan, and we just have to trust that He knows more than we do. How do we see things? We see things darkly through a glass. Eventually, we'll see Him face to face, but God knows more than we do. So to end this, we have a fraternity of suffering on this earth, in this room, etc. We go to a lot of funerals. We all have things that concern us and bother us. But we have the same hope that Mary did. We have the same hope that Martha did. And you know what that hope is? Jesus is the resurrection and the life. That's all I got.